बहुत बार मैंने देखा है कि लोग शेयर्स परचेस करते टाइम उनको समझ में नहीं आता है कि उसे बेचे कब और कब तक होल्ड करके रखे। इसका सबसे प्राइमरी रीज़न यही होता है कि उनको पता नहीं कि बिज़नेस क्या है उनका, उनके नंबर्स क्या बोलते हैं। अगर आपने एक ऐसे बिज़नेस को चूज़ किया है, उसके ऐसे बिज़नेस के स्टॉक्स परचेस किए हैं जो सिर्फ कर्जे से बिज़नेस चला रहा है और आपको पता ही नहीं कि वो कर्ज़ा लेके अपना बिज़नेस चला रहा है, तो आप बड़ी प्रॉब्लम में फंस सकते हो। क्योंकि ऐसे बहुत से हिस्ट्री में ऐसे बिजनेसेस है, ऐसी कंपनीज है जो सिर्फ कर्जे के वजह से डूब गई है। तो अगर आपको जानना है कि कंपनी अपना बिजनेस कौन से पैसों से चला रही है और कंपनी कहाँ कहाँ पे पैसे लगा रही है, तो सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट डॉक्यूमेंट रहेगा बैलेंस शीट। बैलेंस शीट एक ऐसा डॉक्यूमेंट है, एक ऐसी रिपोर्ट है जो कि आपको पर्टिकुलर डेट पे 31 मार्च में आपको ये बताएगी कि कंपनी ने कितने पैसे लिए हुए हैं कर्जे से और कितने पैसे कहाँ कहाँ पे लगाए हुए हैं, कितने पैसे देने हैं क्रेडिटर्स को। मैं जानता हूँ आपका टाइम बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है, मैं फटाफट बता देता हूँ आपको कि इस कोर्स में आपको क्या मिलने वाला है और किन लोगों के लिए ये कोर्स है। अगर आप एक इन्वेस्टर हो या फिर आपको शेयर्स परचेस करने हैं कोई कंपनी के और आपको देखना है कि कंपनी की पोजीशन क्या है, ये कोर्स आपके लिए है। इस कोर्स को मैंने अकाउंटिंग पर्सपेक्टिव से बनाया नहीं। अगर आप अकाउंटेंट हो, आपको बैलेंस शीट बनानी है, इसके लिए नहीं है। लेकिन अगर आपको नंबर्स पढ़ने हैं, अगर आपको बैलेंस शीट एनालाइज करनी है, तो ये कोर्स आपके लिए है। इस कोर्स में क्या क्या मिलेगा ये मैं आपको अभी बताने वाला हूँ। कोर्स को मैंने 8 लेसन्स में डिवाइड किया है। जो फर्स्ट लेसन है उसमें आपको बताने वाला हूँ कि इंपॉर्टेंस क्या है बैलेंस शीट पढ़ने की, जो कि ये वाला वीडियो है। सेकेंड लेसन जो है उसमें मैं बताने वाला ओवरव्यू बैलेंस शीट का। थर्ड जो वीडियो आने वाला है उसमें आपको टर्म्स बताने वाला हूँ कि बैलेंस शीट में जो टर्म्स होते हैं उनके मतलब क्या है। फोर्थ वीडियो में मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ कि जो बैलेंस शीट है उसमें बिजनेस में ओनर्स का फंड और बाहर से मतलब जो बैंक से लोन लेते हैं, ये सब पैसा बिजनेस में आता है और बिजनेस में एसेट्स परचेस करते हैं और वर्किंग कैपिटल बिजनेस चलता है। तो फोर्थ वीडियो में मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ, फोर्थ लेसन जो है वो ओनर्स फंड, बाहर से जो पैसा है उसको मैं एनालाइज करके बताऊंगा, कंपेयर करके बताऊंगा कंपनीज के एग्जाम्पल लेके। फिफ्थ वीडियो में मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ कि जो बाहर से कर्जा लेते हैं कंपनी, लॉन्ग टर्म या शॉर्ट टर्म, बैंक से या फिर अपने क्रेडिटर से भी एक शॉर्ट टर्म हो जाता है। तो उसके बाद सिक्स्थ लेसन में मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ कि कंपनी ने कहाँ कहाँ पे पैसा यूटिलाइज किया है। सेवेंथ में मैं आपको नोट्स जो अकाउंट होता है, जो बैलेंस शीट या पीएनएल और कैश फ्लो के नीचे जो नोट्स लिखे हुए रहते हैं, उसमें कुछ इंसाइट्स होती है जो कि आपको समझना बहुत ही ज़रूरी है। उसके बाद 8वें पार्ट में मैं रेशियोज बताऊंगा और रेशियो स्पेसिफिकली बैलेंस शीट रिलेटेड होगी, लिक्विडिटी रेशियो और ऐसे रेशियो जो बैलेंस शीट के कंटेक्स्ट में होगी। अगर मैं सिंपली बोलूँ तो ये जो रेशियोज है ये पता करने के लिए है कि कंपनी सर्वाइवल कर पाएगी कि नहीं। सर्वाइवल रेशियो समझ लो, लिक्विडिटी रेशियो का मतलब। मैं पूरा बेसिक से स्टार्ट करने वाला हूँ। अगर आपको थोड़ी बहुत इंटरमीडिएट नॉलेज है तो आप आगे मैं वीडियो डालूंगा, तो अगर आप बाद में देखते हो तो स्किप कर सकते हो कौन सा पार्ट आपको देखना है। लेकिन अगर आप बिगिनर हो, आपको बेसिक नॉलेज भी नहीं है बैलेंस शीट के बारे में, वैसे ही मैं स्टार्ट करने वाला हूँ। आप जब ये कोर्स ख़त्म करोगे तब आपको कोई कन्फ्यूजन ना होगी, आप आराम से इजीली कोई भी कंपनी की बैलेंस शीट अच्छे से पढ़ सकते हो। बात करते हैं हमारा पहला लेसन से कि आपको बैलेंस शीट क्यों पढ़नी चाहिए, वाई यू शुड रीड बैलेंस शीट। इस वीडियो में मैंने ज़्यादा कुछ एक्सप्लेन नहीं किया है, लेकिन मैंने वॉरेन बफेट के कुछ वीडियो क्लिप्स है जो कि मैंने उनके एनुअल जनरल मीटिंग से कट करके इस वीडियो के एंड में लगाया है, वो आप ज़रूर देखिएगा। आपको पता चलेगा कि थॉट प्रोसेस क्या है। वॉरेन बफेट जो दुनिया के सबसे बड़े इन्वेस्टर है, वो परचेज कैसे करते हैं, कोई कंपनी को बाय करना रहा तो वो कैसे करते हैं। आपको लगता रहेगा कि उनकी बड़ी बड़ी पहुंच है तो मैनेजमेंट से बातें करते हैं और ये नहीं, लेकिन आपको मैं बोल दूँ कोको कोला से वॉरेन बफेट ने बहुत ज़्यादा पैसे कमाए हैं, लेकिन उस कंपनी को उन्होंने परचेस किया था सिर्फ उनके एनुअल रिपोर्ट्स को पढ़ के। वॉरेन बफेट और बहुत सारी कंपनीज है ऐसी जो वॉरेन बफेट ने सिर्फ एनुअल रिपोर्ट्स पढ़ के परचेस की है। तो इस वीडियो के एंड में आप देख लीजिएगा कौन कौन से क्लिप्स है। मैंने ज़्यादा तो नहीं, लेकिन 2-3 क्लिप्स मैंने रख दी है, बहुत ही काम के लिए। आपको मोटिवेशन मिलेगी कि आपको बैलेंस शीट क्यों पढ़नी चाहिए।
Mr. Buffett, my name is Hutch Vernon. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I know that you read lots and lots of annual reports, and I'm curious what you are reading for, if you would share that with us. But I'm more curious, because I think I know what you're reading for, if there are any disclosures, any further disclosures that you would like to see companies make in their financial reporting, or that the SEC require in financial reporting or proxies or other communications with their shareholders. And that would be for both you and for Mr. Munger.
Yeah, the main thing that they can't mandate in annual reports, I really like to have, I like to know as much as I can about the person that's running it and how they think about the business and what's really going on in the business. In other words, I would like to have a report that would be identical to what if I owned half of a company but was away for a year and I had a partner who owned the other half. When I came back, that he would tell me about what had taken place during the past year and what he foresaw coming up and all of that. That is what I think the purpose of the report is. Now, the SEC mandates a lot of information, and some of that is helpful, but there's an intent behind the report. I mean, if it's a sales document, I'm less interested. I don't see any way to mandate what I'm talking about, but that's the kind of report I'm looking for. What I'm trying to do as I read reports, I like to understand just generally what's going on in all kinds of businesses. If we own stock in a company in an industry and there are 8 other companies that are in the same industry, I want to own or be on the mailing list for the reports for the other 8, because I can't understand how my company is doing unless I understand what the other 8 are doing. I want to have the perspective in terms of market share or what's going on in the business or their margins or the trend of margins or all kinds of things that I can't get unless I know. I can't be an intelligent owner of a business unless I know what all the other businesses in that industry are doing. And so I try to get that information out of a report. If I'm thinking about investing in a specific company, I try to size up their business and the people that are running it. And over the years, I found reading a lot of reports to be quite useful in terms of making business decisions at Berkshire. If we own a whole of a business, I want to own shares in all of the competitors just to keep track of what's going on. And I want to be able to intelligently evaluate how our managers are doing that, and I can't do that unless I know the industry backdrop against which they're working. It's amazing how well you can do in investing really with what I would call outside information. I find inside information, I'm not sure how useful that is, but outside information, there's all kinds of information around as to businesses, and you don't have to understand all of them, and you just have to understand the ones that you're thinking about getting in, and you can do it if you just, nobody will do it for you. You can't read. In my view, you can't read Wall Street reports and get anything out of them. You have to do it yourself and get your arms around it. I don't think we've ever gotten an idea, in 40 years from a Wall Street report, but we've gotten a lot of ideas from annual reports. Charlie?
What I find is that it takes a long time to read the annual report, even if it's a comparatively simple business. As if you really are trying to understand it, it's not a bit easy.
Yeah, I would say that on average in a business we're really interested in, even though we know what to skip to some extent, what to read, I mean, it's going to be 45 minutes or an hour on a report, and if there are 6 or 8 companies in the industry, that's going to be 6 or 8 hours perhaps, and then there are quarterlies and a lot of other. I mean, the way you learn about businesses is by absorbing information about them, thinking it, deciding what counts and what doesn't count, relating one thing to another, and that's the job. And you can't get that by looking at a bunch of little numbers on a chart bobbing up and down about or reading market commentary and periodicals or anything of the sort. That just won't do it. You've got to understand the businesses. That's where it all begins and ends.
Hello, I'm Steve Davis from San Francisco. I'd like your advice on how to understand annual reports, what you look for, what's important, what's not important, and what you've learned over the years from reading thousands of reports. Thank you.
Well, we've read a lot of reports, I will tell you that. And we start by looking at the reports of companies that we think we can understand. So we hope to be reading reports, and I do read hundreds of them every year. We hope to be reading reports of businesses that are understandable to us. And then we see from that report whether the management is telling us about the things that we would want to know about if we owned 100% of the company. And when we find a management that does tell us about those things and that is candid in the same way that a manager of a subsidiary would be candid with us and talks in language that we can understand, it definitely improves our feeling about investing in such a business, and the reverse turns us off to some extent. So if we read a bunch of public relations gobbledygook, and we see lots of pictures and no facts, it has some effect on our attitude toward a business. We want to understand the business better when we get through with the annual report than when we picked it up. And that is not difficult for management to do if they want to do it. If they don't want to do it, we think that is a factor in whether we want to be their partners over a 10-year period or so. But we've learned a lot from annual reports. For example, I would say that the Coca-Cola annual report over the last good many years has been an enormously informative document. I mean, I can't think of any way if I had had a conversation with Roberto Goizueta or now Doug Ivester, and they were telling me about the business, they would not be telling me more than I get from reading that annual report. We bought that stock based on an annual report. We did not buy it based on any conversation of any kind with the top management of Coca-Cola before we bought our interest. We simply bought it based on reading the annual report, plus our knowledge of how the business worked. Charlie?
I do think if you've got a standardized bunch of popular jargon that looks like it came out of the same consulting firm, I do think it's a big turnoff. That's not to say that some of the consulting mantras aren't right, but I think there's a lot for sort of candid, simple, coherent prose. A lot to be said for it.
Almost every business has problems, and we just assume the manager would tell us about them. We would like that in the businesses we run. In fact, one of the things, we give very little advice to our managers, but one thing we always do say is to tell us the bad news immediately, and I don't see why that isn't good advice for the manager of a public company. Over time, I'm positive it's the best policy, but a lot of companies, for example, have investor relations people, and they're dying just to pump out what they think is good news all the time, and they have this attitude that that you've got a bunch of animals out there to be fed, and that they're going to feed them what they want to eat all the time, and over time the animals learn. So we try and stay away from businesses like that.
What you seldom see in an annual report is a sentence like this: "This is a very serious problem, and we haven't quite figured out yet how to handle it." But believe me, that is an accurate statement much of the time. All right, zone 3.
And I took a lot of accounting courses, but by far the best instruction I received in accounting came from Ray Dean, and there's nothing more important. People ask me what they should take in business school, or even if they don't go to business school, what they need to know before getting in business, and I tell them, you have to understand accounting. It's the language. I mean, it's like being in a foreign country without knowing the language if you're in business and you don't understand accounting. So you want to get as comfortable with that as you are with the English language. It's made me a lot of money because I listened to what Ray Dean had to say 53 or 4 years ago, and have been able to understand what I was seeing on pieces of paper, what that told me about businesses, and the limitations of what it told me about businesses. But that's the way we invest. Yesterday I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we bought a company. We agreed to buy a company called Clayton Homes about a week ago. It's a big company in the manufactured home business. We agreed to pay $1.7 billion for it. I made that deal over the phone without ever meeting the people there, but I had seen enough through reading 10Ks, 10Qs, annual reports, but looking at figures, what they tell me in terms of the kind of people even running the place, the kind of accounting decisions they make and so on. I was able to make that $1.7 billion transactions over the phone. Yesterday was the first time I met the people, and their board of directors had actually approved the deal a week earlier. So it's, I couldn't have done that if I hadn't have, I had a great time at Ray Dean's class 53 years ago. So if I'm going to tout one thing, aside from this particular leadership class, of course, if I'm going to tout one thing, I would tell you that get comfortable with it. It may not happen the first week or the first month in the class, but get very comfortable with accounting. So that I run into CEOs periodically who really don't understand it. They try to bluff their way through, and you can see it in their faces. They're frightened almost when somebody hands them a balance sheet or an income statement. They really don't know what it means, and they have to count on somebody else. And that's something you shouldn't count on. We make all our acquisition decisions ourselves. I mean, we don't call in consultants or anybody. We don't call in investment bankers, much to their disgust. No investment banking fees in the Clayton Holmes deal, because it's my responsibility running Berkshire to understand enough about our acquisition decisions to make them based on the numbers that I see and what I see there.